Hello everyone and welcome back to the Council of Elrond, the world's #1 Lord of the Rings podcast where we discuss all things Middle-earth. I'm joined as always by my wonderful brother and co-host Johnny.
Hello.
And speaking of brothers, today on our final episode of Season 3, I thought it'd be nice to talk about a very well-known brother in Middle-earth, or more specifically in Númenor. He is actually one of the last surviving Númenorians and a legendary character in Tolkien's works. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at the life and death of Isildur. Do you say Isildur, or how do you pronounce it? Do you say Isildur?
No, I would say Isildur.
Yeah, I've seen that pronunciation a few times, but
you've seen people that are
To
wrong.
make sure. Yeah, exactly. People are wrong. Yeah, it's Isildur. And
I mean, we are people, and we're probably wrong lots of the time as well.
60% of the time, we're wrong every time. But I mean, Tolkien does actually talk about the pronunciation of Isildur, and he says something about like the I should sound like machine, and the Dur should sound like
the doors of Doran.
like the doors of Dur. Yeah. So it is actually spelt out plainly there for people to go and look at. But
it's also
anyway.
just like there's a couple of his books as well. I know it's in the Silmarillion. I know it's in the Children of Hurin. That at the beginning, could be at the end of some of them. There's an actual pronunciation page.
Guide.
I'm not going to say that I've actually used that to pronounce the name of Isildur, but I think that's just the way they pronounce it in the movies, and that's the way I took it to be.
Yeah, and it's fairly accurate in the movies. A lot of the pronunciations are pretty damn good in the movies. The Peter Jackson ones, not the cartoons where we see things
Minus
like
Tirith.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Aruman.
Anyways, let's get into it. Isildur, who was born in 3209 of the Second Age in Númenor, which, if people don't know, that is the great island of men, or the Dunedain. What do we know of Isildur's family, Jonathan? Who's in his family?
Well, we know he had a brother called Anarion, and they were quite the duo, them two. And we know his father Elendil, and and his mother.
And what about Earion?
Earion, is that the sister from the show?
From the Rings of Power, yeah.
Yeah.
What's her deal?
She's not real.
No.
Okay.
No, that was completely made up for the show.
Yeah, it's fabricated by Amazon, yeah.
Fabricated, but I think it is a cool name, like Earion. It does kind of work.
Yeah, it sounds
Númenorian
Tolkienian, and it sounds like she'd be part of their family, right? Yeah. I mean, it sounds quite like his brother Anarion, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. And it's cool. So we have Elendil, which is the father. You were correct there. Anarion, who is 10 years younger than Isildur. And Isildur was described to be a 7-foot man, which was very common for Númenorians. Yeah, so he was described as being 7 foot or 2.13 meters.
Jeez,
so for anyone who goes by that metric. But yeah, Johnny, we've talked about it many times before in other episodes, but the name Isildur, where does that come from?
Well, his father was going to call him a sea lion gate, but then he went for a Isildur instead.
Yes, that's exactly it. He wanted to name it after some sort of mammal.
No, so he wanted to. So sorry, Isildur. So there's the. Is there something to do with Ithilden?
Yes, but like you're even going too far. Like, where does Ithilden come from? Like, that is what is that? That's the stuff that's like shone from a certain type of light.
Yeah,
which would be
Ithilden's like the invisible ink for the elves, I suppose. It's like it shines, it reflects the moonlight and the sunlight. Or sorry, the moonlight and the starlight. So there's Ithil is something with the starlight, I think. Isildur, is there something to do with starlight or moonlight?
Well, moon. So moon. Isil is moon.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so you've got Minas. No, it's Minas Ithil, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's still it's still kind of
Minas
the same
Ithil
thing.
and Minas Arnor, which are the two towers that are the two places where Isildur and Anarion they took up residence. And I remember just like we spoke about this before as well, that the first letter of each of the things is like helps you to remember which of the brothers was in which place, because it was one was beginning with A, one was beginning with I.
And yeah, so Isildur was moon, and so then he was in Minas Ithil, and what was
Moon Boy?
Minas Anor?
Tower of the Moon and Tower of the Sun.
Yes, well done. We're not going to get too much into Anarion in this, but
I was thinking, Champion of the Sun. Ah, that's what I was going through my head there.
Isildur's name means servant of the moon, and that comes from Ithil, so Ithil, which is moon, and Dur is servant. So we'll see. You've seen those names or those words pop up many times in all of Middle-earth. But yes, for years the men of Númenor had become very hateful over the Valar. The Valar, in case people don't know, we've brought it up slightly a few times in our podcast, but who are they, Johnny?
The Valar are the big gods and the people who just leave it at that, I suppose, the gods. But you've got the Maiar then as well, who are demigods, who are like Gandalf and Sauron, people like that. But a tier above them would be the Valar.
Yeah, exactly. So they're kind of like the gods and the creators of the universe in some ways. And the men of Númenor had slowly over time just become very hateful over the Valar and the elves. And they were increasingly rebellious in their actions. The men of Númenor also had settlements in Middle-earth, such as Harad, where the men became cruel overlords. Now, there was a main political party in Númenor, and we do see them pop up in season 2 of The Rings of Power. Do you remember the name of this political party, John?
The Kingsmen.
Exactly. Yes, the Kingsmen. So they were the oppressing the men that remained true to the Valar, and the men that remained true to the Valar were called the
Faithful.
Exactly. Yes. So the Faithful, this included Isildur and his family. And luckily for Elendil's family, 32 years before the birth of Isildur, one of the Faithful of Númenor ascended the throne. So do you remember the name of this guy? He is basically the king of Númenor at the time.
Palantir.
Exactly. Yes, which means like far-sighted king. And we see the word tar being switched to ar later, but that's kind of like a rebellious change of names.
Yeah, Tar would have been like Your Majesty or King or Royal or whatever in the Elven tongue, and then they stopped using that because they didn't want to follow the elves, and in that same way, in that same vein, follow the Valar. So they changed it to R, which was the way of the men.
Yeah, exactly. Drop the T, carry the R. Yeah. So in 3255, when Isildur is at the young age of 46, Tar Palantir dies and Númenor basically descends into chaos. And again, if people have watched the Rings of Power show, you don't really get to see much of this play out, but that's what's supposed to be happening. When the king dies, the whole island of Númenor just goes into a shitstorm. The throne is then usurped by whom, Johnny?
By Ar-Pharazôn.
Ar-Pharazôn, and he was the nephew of Tar Palantir and the leader of the Kingsmen faction. And he goes all Game of Thrones and incestually marries his cousin, who is the rightful heir, and her name is Tar Miriel, again another character in The Rings of Power. And she is the daughter of the recently deceased king, of course. So, by the way, here's a good time to mention that there may be potential spoilers for the future seasons of The Rings of Power if anyone is following that. But the show has diverged so much from the source material that I think it's kind of safe to say that it's probably not going to be an issue. So please continue listening to us.
It won't be anything like it.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this podcast is about Isildur, and I don't want to deviate too far from his story, but there are some things that I have to mention. So Ar-Pharazôn, basically, he sends a gigantic fleet to Middle-earth, and he wants to war with Sauron.
How big are these feet?
A gigantic fleet. They're at least like 8'2". Yeah, these monstrous clown feet. So he captures Sauron at Umbar, but just within a year, Sauron goes from being enslaved by the king to corrupting him enough to be his chief advisor. So imagine how silver-tongued Sauron has to be.
And also, like, we need to remember, like a year is just an absolute blink of the eye. The older I get, a year just keeps, like, it's like, oh my god, a year is just passing like nothing. Nothing. For the Númenorians, they were very long living men, so a year would be like a month to them. So that's,
and it is crazy. Like, I even said the other day, we're coming up to 1/6 of the way through 2025. Like, what? I haven't even gotten used to saying
What 1/6 of the
it's
way?
true, right? We're 1/6 of the way through. That's crazy to me. I don't know.
We're also 55 365ths through.
You're goddamn right.
I'm not right. I what day is today? It's I don't know. So we're about 50 something.
50 something. Close.
Yeah.
Anyways, I wanted to ask you, Johnny, about something in Númenor that's very important. What is the name of the important tree in Númenor?
The Nimloth.
The Nimloth. One of the things that Sauron did while he was counseling the king was he basically urged the king to cut down the white tree of Nimloth, as it was a memorial to the Eldar and the light of Valinor. And it was Isildur's grandfather, whose name was Armandil, that tells Isildur about this awful act. And do you remember, Johnny, we talked about it in our trees episode. What does Isildur do when he hears that Sauron wants to, or basically Ar-Pharazôn is going to cut down the tree?
Well, he goes on. Does he get like? I'm not sure if does he get like some seeds from the plant, or does he get like a piece, like one of the plants itself, or something like that, or like some of the saplings or something, and he takes care of that, and then he ends up transporting that over to Middle Earth.
Yeah.
When he makes the journey across.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to hear more about that, you can check out our episode 2, Trees of Valinor, Truth and Lies, where we discuss all about the trees and the lineage.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was a bit... I wasn't completely confident in my answer because I was getting mixed up between when Aragorn ends up going out in like the Fourth Age, and he and I, because I remember thinking like, oh yeah, didn't he just like have a thing as well, and it wasn't, he just like went out and was like walking in the mountains and like, accidentally stumbled upon one of these trees that was growing as well or something, and he was like, oh, and he used that then to be the new White Tree of Gondor. But yeah, so I was getting mixed up between those two stories.
But yeah, in between those two stories of the saplings of the tree of Nimloth, there's loads of times where, you know, a fruit had to be rescued. This is the first time. So I love how like loads of shit is going down, but like to Isildur, he's like, oh, I draw the line when someone's burning down a tree. So he basically, what Isildur does, without mentioning this to any of his family members, by the way.
He's like Ralph Fiennes in The Constant Gardener.
He's exactly like Ralph Fiennes in The Constant Gardener. He snuck into the courts of the king in Ar-Menelaus, disguised as it was completely forbidden for any faithful members to enter. So he stole a fruit from the tree of Nimloth, but unfortunately he alerted the guards. But
a fruit.
Yeah, a fruit. And he had to basically fight his way out. And yeah, it was pretty badass. Like he went around killing loads of people. Now he was seriously injured in the process, but luckily it wasn't known who stole the fruit from the tree because his cover wasn't blown. So he did quite a good job.
That'd be such a class level of a game on like PlayStation or something. Okay, gotta go in, gotta undercover, find this fruit. Oh no, you've alerted the guards. Now fight your way out. Like,
it's like Assassin's Creed. You have to like sneak in stealthily style, and then like no matter what you do, the guards are alert, and you have to do like a runaway chase mission. Should do an Assassin's Creed game for Lord of the Rings. That would be deadly.
Yeah. I suppose that's kind of what I was Shadow Mordor.
Yeah, it is a little bit like you have that stealth thing. You can go sneak up and stab people.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, Isildur returns to his family. Armandil, who is his grandfather, he blesses the fruit and he plants it in secret. Keep it secret, keep it safe. Now, Isildur at this point, he's on death's door. He's got a bad case of man flu. He's bedridden for ages. Genuinely, he was close to death because he got like severely wounded in this escape. And everyone thought he was going to die. But in the spring, a shoot arose from the plant. From the planted fruit. And when the first leaf opened, Isildur was completely healed. And he never felt any trouble from his wounds again. So it's kind of...
Was it a dock leaf?
He got a nettle sting on his way out of the fight. And he was like, thank God.
He had to rub the dock leaf on his arse. He's like, all better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was just complaining of like an arse sting from nettle. That would be gas. He was completely saved by the resurrection of this Nimloth fruit, which is cool. But yeah, anyways, over the years, Sauron's grasp over the king helped Númenor fall further and further into darkness and decay, with obviously the eventual burning of Nimloth because he was successful in that. He was also terrorizing and enslaving men from Middle-earth and often there were actual sacrifices of the faithful to Melkor or to Morgoth, whatever you want to say. So Númenor was a terrible, terrible place to live in at the time.
Not good.
But in the meantime, Isildur was having the time of his life because he had his first son in 3299 and he was named Elendor. So Elendor, I probably should have looked that up, but obviously that's the servant of Elen, whatever that would be. If anyone knows, let us know in the chat.
His father.
Yeah,
The servant of his
the
father.
servant of his father. Finally, as the king had now grown old, so I'm talking about Ar-Pharazôn, he was near death. Sauron, knowing the king feared death, persuaded him to sail west, so not east to Middle-earth, sail west to Valinor to basically start a big war with the Valar, who are the gods, in order to try take immortality by force. So this is kind of a crazy endeavor that Sauron has manipulated the king to do.
Go on, we can take him.
Yeah, exactly. And I just imagine Sauron being like, go on, you can do it, you can do it. I suppose he had nothing left to lose. Like, he was going to die anyways, and he was like, maybe if I besiege Valinor, I will eventually become immortal. So yeah, fair play to him. Now, when Amandel
That's the spirit.
when Amandel, who seems to be the greatest gossip in Númenor, he's again Isildur's grandfather, he heard this and he told his family to prepare ships for themselves to leave Númenor, but he decided that he would sail west to Valinor to try and warn the Valar, and basically he set off and it was said that he was never heard from again. So unfortunately his mission was not, it could have been successful, we don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not. But anyways, in the year 3319, Ar-Pharazôn finally launches his another gigantic fleet, and that's fleet with an L. He sends them west. Meanwhile, Elendil, Isildur, Anarion, Elendor, and the remaining faithful flee Númenor to Middle-earth, and that included 9 ships, which Elendil commanded 4 of them, Isildur commanded 3, and Anarion 2. And Isildur's own ship had on it the saved white tree that was descended from the Nimloth. So this big battle ensued. Johnny, how did Ar-Pharazôn do in this big battle against the Valar?
Not good, David.
Not very good at all.
Didn't go. No. Well, I mean, it was actually pretty impressive, I suppose, considering he was taking on the Valar, but he was doomed to die, and he'd Sauron there giving him bad advice, I suppose, the whole time, and so it didn't go very well for him.
So obviously he was defeated, and what did he do? Did he get to return back to Númenor, or what was going on? What happened?
Oh, well, there was no Númenor, I suppose.
Exactly.
It
got French 5'd.
It sank.
Yeah.
It was half these. It sank. What happened to Ar-Pharazôn? Did he die in that battle?
Oh, he died dead.
Yeah. He got what was coming to him, I suppose. But
He got his comeuppance.
He did indeed. But of course, he and all the rest of the Númenorians, they weren't able to retreat back to Númenor, I suppose, because it did get washed into the sea and got destroyed. So,
exactly.
So
it
was a massive defeat, I suppose.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I'm not just going to destroy your army that you send here. I'm going to destroy your entire world that you've lived on for centuries. But yeah. So the whole fleet was destroyed along with Númenor. And it says that a great wave from the storm that sank the island guided the 9 ships of the faithful east towards Middle-earth. So that was nice.
And Sauron died as well, I suppose. We should also mention that.
Sauron also, his form was destroyed. So, and that was the last time we get.
Just one of his deaths.
One of his deaths. He's like a cat, 9 lives. But that was the last.
That was like number 7 or 8. He's just getting up there.
Yeah. That was the last time we see his beautiful form, I suppose. He was never to return as a beautiful lad ever again.
He was not so cutesy after that.
No. So basically, Elendil's ships are carried by the storm northward, and he ends up docking at Lindon. Lindon is where Gil-galad and Elrond live, and he would then travel up the River Lune and establish a certain kingdom. Do you remember the name of the kingdom that Elendil establishes, John?
Arnor?
Exactly, Arnor. Whilst Isildur and Anarion's ships were carried southwards to the mouths of the Anduin, and they made their way up this river and established the realm of Gondor in the year 3320. So they jointly ruled Gondor together, the two brothers, Isildur and Anarion. And where did these guys live, Johnny? You already kind of mentioned it.
Yeah, they were in Minas Ithil and Minas Anor. So, which then became Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul.
Yeah, exactly. So
when you look at where Mordor is, when you look at the mountain range that comes around, that sort of like C shape.
Yeah.
There's the two towers. Well, not the two towers that are the famous two towers, but I suppose maybe they were the two towers.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. But Minas Tirith and Minas Morgul, you can see that they're just like either side of the mountain range there.
Yeah, exactly. So, and what's in between them as well?
The Black Gate.
No, in between.
Sorry, and it was Gilead.
Yeah, exactly. So it was Isildur that sets up in Minas Ithil, and there he plants the new sapling, so the new white tree. Anarion establishes Minas Anor, which you correctly mentioned goes on to become Minas Tirith. And in between the two fortresses was the capital city of Gondor, Osgiliath. And so this is neither the home of either of the two men, but it is...
Yeah, so then in the throne room, there was like a room with like two thrones, weren't there?
Yeah.
And they would come together they'd come for a little like, sure, look, we'll meet halfway.
Yeah.
And we'll meet in Osgiliath. Yeah.
Their meeting point.
Why do I have to go all the way to you? Why did you come all the way here? Look, we'll compromise. We'll meet in the middle there now.
It's basically like...
We'll have a throne room.
You and me meeting up, and we're like, we'll meet in Athlone for a cup of coffee, and that'll be nice. So yeah, that's where they
will lead us to kings.
Oh yeah, they lead us to kings. That's exactly what they did. By the way, fun fact, Osgiliath is also called the Citadel of the Stars, so I just wanted to pop that in there. But Johnny, this we've got Isildur, Anarion, and Elendil. Are you able to like tell me how the hierarchy of the rulers of Gondor and Arnor worked? Like who was ahead of who, or who was the king?
Well, Isildur was the High King. Sorry, Isildur. Elendil was the High King.
Yes, exactly.
Excuse me. So he was technically the ruler of both Arnor and Gondor. But he kind of just let the boys do most of the ruling of Gondor. And I suppose when we see the movies and we see that kind of time, Gondor was maybe the more well-known of the two. But back then, Arnor was probably a more important base than Gondor itself. And that's where the High King... he ruled from Arnor. And so that's... I mean, I suppose it was Elendil, and then it would have gone down to like Isildur and Arya.
Yeah, correct.
I suppose it would have gone in like the order as well. Isildur was the eldest.
Yeah, you're correct. So Elendil's title was High King of Arnor. His two sons were still... kings. They were the two kings of Gondor, but yeah, I think ultimately if you had to create a hierarchy, who was the CEO, the CFO, all that kind of stuff, it would be Elendil on top. What he says goes. But yeah, he had trusted his two sons to rule Gondor. So I thought this would be a nice place to mention Maxim Baldry. And this is the actor who depicts Isildur in the Rings of Power. We're not going to be discussing any more Rings of Power after this point. I just wanted to ask you, Johnny, what are you making of his performance so far? We've gotten 2 seasons out of him. Are you enjoying him as Isildur?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get... I'm trying to think of the season that we discussed, season 2.
Yeah, he's just like hanging around in Pelargir, isn't he?
Was he in that at all, hardly? Oh, he was in Pelargir, yeah. We basically got like... I think he was in like 2 episodes. Yeah, so we didn't get to see much of him. I didn't like anything about what happened in season 2 with Isildur. Like, I just didn't like that story arc. I hated that he was just like... had this weird love triangle with some random one in Pelargir, and just kind of... I didn't like that storyline at all. So I didn't... But I think the actor himself is he's doing as good a job as he can. I quite enjoyed him. I enjoyed him a lot more maybe in season 1. But yeah, he's just he's not exactly what I was expecting, I suppose. Again, it's very difficult when you grow up watching the movies and then you read the books, and then all the time from when I'm reading the books I have that image of the actor from the movies, and then I mean, he's similar-ish, I suppose, but not exactly. So I mean, yeah, he's fine, but I definitely, if I'm thinking of Isildur, I'm not thinking of this actor. I'm thinking of the actor from the original Fellowship of the Ring book,
me too.
movie. The good thing about the show, I suppose, showing Isildur is giving a more, like the movies, from the movies you would just maybe think, oh, he's a bad guy. He's a bad character because he didn't give up the ring. And we shouldn't think of Isildur as a bad character at all. So if there's anything that we're getting out of the Rings of Power and this kind of getting to know this character of Isildur, I think that's probably a good thing, that we're not going to think of him as now like, oh, he's only famous because one thing he did, which was he got the ring and he refused to destroy it. He also wasn't taken into like the like right insides of the volcano with
Elrond.
With Elrond. He wasn't taken in there. That was, again, just something that Peter Jackson threw in. Yeah, so he wasn't a terrible person, I suppose. So if Maxim Baldry can make people have this sort of, a better connection with the character, well, then hopefully that will be a good thing from it.
True, yeah. And when you read the book as well, you will see that Isildur is mentioned as like a highly regarded, really good man. And even up to the end, it is different to how it's done in Peter Jackson's film. So like, he doesn't seem like a massively corrupted person. He's a person with a huge burden on him, and obviously in a couple of minutes in a movie you have to kind of portray how evil the ring is and make him look evil. And I'll get into a little fact as well about the actor that played Isildur, which is kind of cool, how he's like a corrupted looking person. But I wanted to ask you as well, Johnny, just off the top of your head, can you think of any famous Númenorian buildings in Middle-earth that were constructed during Isildur and Anarion/Elendil's rule? Like, we've mentioned a few already, I suppose.
Tower of Orthanc.
Tower of Orthanc, yeah, that's a good one. That's in Isengard, for people that don't know what that is. So
Saruman's gaff, I suppose, the big black tower.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that has that same kind of black stone material would be basically the lowest level of the wall around the Mountain Ministers.
Ramas Ekor, isn't it?
Yes, Ramas Ekor. Yeah.
Well, just in general,
or is that the gate?
Yeah, we've already mentioned Minas Tirith or Minas Anor is one.
I suppose those are the kind of special ones that are made with this kind of particular rock that nobody knows how it was formed or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it came from a meteor, I believe.
Meteor man.
So any other buildings you're looking for?
Yeah, well, like you've got that. We've got obviously Osgiliath. We mentioned Minas Ithil. Any other ones?
Probably like the watchtowers of like Amon Hen and Amon Sul.
Amon Sul, yeah, very good. So I'll just throw in another couple here. We've got in the north we would have Númenor, which is the capital city of Arnor. You've already mentioned Amon Sul, which is also called Weathertop. And then we have the 3 White Towers, which is, again, they're also in the north. Then in the south, we have Minas Anor, Minas Ithil, Osgiliath, Orthanc. And you'll see why I'm mentioning a lot of these places. There's no coincidence, because I want to ask you as well, Johnny. Do you remember, we've mentioned one thing so far in this episode, but do you remember what the Númenorians brought to Middle-earth?
He brought the fruit, obviously, that was used then for the Nimloth. Mm-hmm. Is there something that's very obvious that he brought?
It's not like super obvious, but like
he brought the faith, I suppose.
I was thinking more like physical, tangible items that he brought.
His sword,
his shoes. Okay, so we got an heirloom that Aragorn would go on to own.
The Ring of Barahir?
Yes, that's one. Also, I mentioned a bunch of buildings there earlier. 7 of these would have been very important because they were specific locations that certain items were placed in. Items of communication.
The Palantir.
Exactly. The 7 seeing stones. So the 3 kings strategically placed their Palantiri across Middle-earth in the locations that I mentioned there earlier. So also in the 3 White Towers I mentioned, Olasterion was the tallest of the 3 White Towers. And these were basically just to communicate between one another for the kings and to also oversee their lands. There's also another item, a big item that we would have mentioned in the episode where we talked about the dead men of Dunharrow.
Was it a rock?
It was a rock. So basically, Isildur he brings a great black stone, which is placed on the hill of Eric. So I'm not sure if you remember that from the episode. So
yes.
this is in West Gondor, and he places it as a symbol and a meeting point. And so you can check out our episode entitled Oathbreakers and the Paths of the Dead. This is where the king of the men of the mountains swore an allegiance to Isildur, vowing to serve the sons of Elendil and all their kin forever, even if death should take them. And as we know, they don't honour their allegiance, so we'll get into that a bit later. And yeah, so Isildur brought over a couple of items from Númenor, which was nice. And but yeah, we have kind of a time of peace here, where Isildur ruled for a large time. And he had two more sons, Aratan, who was born in the year 3339, and Kirian, who was born in 3379. But all during this time of peace, Sauron had managed to return to Mordor in secret and regain physical form. But this time he was gross, he was hideous and dirty. So Sauron, being the man he is, he did a few things like interior designing. He was calling up on allies in the south. And he created the goddamn one ruling ring as well. Now, he...
Just on a random Saturday, he was like, I've got to have a little arts and crafts project.
Jewelry making, yeah, exactly. He
workshopping some ideas.
So he was obviously gaining a lot of power over in the east, and he absolutely hated the Númenorian exiles, such as Elendil and Isildur, etc. And he plotted war. So in 3429, Sauron attacked Minas Ithil. So remember, this is what goes on to become Minas Morgul. He captures the city, plunders it, and he burns down the white tree that Isildur planted there. Now, Isildur, his wife, and his son escape with another seedling of the white tree. So he's just constantly regenerating, like, it's pretty handy. And he sails down the Anduin, then up the sea to his father in Arnor, and warns of Sauron's return. Now, meanwhile, Anarion, his brother, is in Osgiliath defending it against Sauron's forces. So he's like holding Gondor at, he's protecting it a little bit, but Minas Ithil is gone. It's Minas Morgul at this point. So the following year, in 3430, the last alliance of men and elves is formed during a meeting at Amon Sul, which is also named Weathertop, between Elendil and Gil-galad. This is also when Isildur summons the men of the mountains. So, like, around the same time, Isildur summons the men of the mountains to fulfill their oath, but unfortunately, they were Sauron worshippers at this point, and we know what happens to them. They basically become the cursed dead men of Dunharrow. Yeah, Isildur, he cursed them, and then he heads off to Rivendell, to his holiday home, where his fourth son, Valandil, is born. Do you remember where we hear the name Valandil as well in recent media?
Yeah, he gets... Yeah, well, that's Isildur's best friend who got killed off in the last season of The Rings of Power as well. So I'm assuming that's where they got the name for that character, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a nice nod. I think it is cool to go like, well, what would I name my son? This guy who was practically my brother in arms. So Gil-galad and Elendil arrive with their combined forces, and after 3 years of planning and building an army, they depart Rivendell, leaving behind Isildur's wife and youngest son. So the elves from Lorien and Greenwood join, along with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, and they all go down to Mordor and basically defeat Sauron's army at the Battle of Dagorlad. Isildur and his forces travel into Mordor and lay siege to Sauron's tower, Barad-dûr, and this is what we basically see in the opening prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring. But, Johnny, Sauron's defeat, his demise, how is it? Do you remember how it's different to the book? Like the movie version.
Yeah, there's quite a few differences, I suppose. The first one is that a lot of people that when they complain about stupid things are like, like why didn't the eagles take the ring, whatever. But one of the things that people always say is, why did Sauron reach out with that hand with the ring on it to try and grab Isildur? He was such an idiot. He should have used the other hand. That didn't happen at all. That's just a complete movie fabrication to make it look kind of more menacing and have that hand grabbing. But it is cool. But what actually happened was so Elendil and Gil-galad, they both were fighting against Sauron, and basically it was like not just like a Rocky 2 freeze frame ending where they knock each other out. It was like a 3-way where all three of them just kind of died all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And they all, Gil-galad and Elendil both got killed in the same moment, I suppose. And then Sauron his body was kind of broken. He was lying there, face down on the ground, I suppose. And then Isildur went over and got a knife out and cut off the ring from Sauron's unconscious body.
Yeah, exactly. Bang on. First of all, in the movie, you don't really realize how long the battle is. It's
years.
Full on siege. It's
the war, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a 7-year. There was the big battle at the Battle of Dagorlad, and then they basically proceed to move into Mordor. Then this siege at Barad-dûr is 7 years long, and it's on the 6th year that unfortunately Isildur's brother Narion is killed. He's basically killed. There's a rock thrown from the Dark Tower. This was in the year 3440. But on the 7th year, Sauron finally decides to come out of the tower himself, and we get that image as well in Peter Jackson's, where it's like finally the Dark Lord comes out to the forces.
The appearance.
Yeah, the appearance. And he basically draws all the forces back towards the slopes of Mount Doom. So this is basically going from east to west, driving all of the good guys basically back towards the slopes of Mount Doom. And yeah, as you rightfully said, Elendil and Gil-galad duel Sauron. It's basically a three-way death. Now, you're right. Another movie change as well is that Sauron steps on the sword Narsil, but that doesn't happen. As Elendil falls, as he dies, he falls and his sword Narsil just breaks from under him. And yes, Isildur used...
It's kind of a classic kind of fantasy writing.
Kind of Arthurian a bit.
Yeah, maybe quite Arthurian, all right, yeah. So when somebody who wields a particular sword, when that person dies, the sword breaks beneath them. Even though I think that's quite a ridiculous thing, but I suppose it's kind of almost like the sword and the warrior are one, and so
exactly.
The breaking of the person's body or their spirit equals the breaking of the sword that they use. And I suppose we also spoke about that in one of our most recent episodes about the gifts of Galadriel. That what do we say that Galadriel gifted Aragorn, David?
She gifted him the sheath for his sword.
Correct. And what blessing was put upon this sheath?
That it would never be bloodied, or it would never allow his sword to break or be bloodied in battle.
Yeah, so again, I suppose the very sword that we're speaking about that was broken was then remade, reforged, and Galadriel gifted Aragorn a special sheath for the sword with the blessing saying that the sword would never be stained and it would never be broken. So that's quite a cool little thing as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It is kind of like the sword and the master are one, because if you think the sword just broke if you fell over, it seems a bit flimsy. But
yeah, so in that same vein, then maybe Galadriel's blessing over the sword saying it will never be broken, it kind of also means you will never be killed in battle.
Oh, yeah, that is quite cool. That is an interesting way to look at it. Didn't think of that.
I just thought of it right now, so it's not like I've got this theory I'm working on.
Write it down. Tell Mr. Tolkien. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to ask you again. When we see Isildur and Elrond at the cracks of doom, why didn't Elrond just push Isildur into the fire, or even just battle him for the ring? This I'm talking about in the movie.
Yeah, in the movie, in the movie that didn't really happen. Sorry, in the books that didn't happen.
Yeah,
because they didn't actually go there. I think Elrond may have advised him and said, you should probably destroy that ring. But again, he's speaking to the king of Gondor and Arnor. He can't just be like, do this, and it wasn't so clear cut. Like when you're watching the movie and the ring is bad, it can only be destroyed in Mount Doom. We don't know if Elrond had all the facts at this time.
Yeah,
so
that's
he might
very
not have
true,
known
actually.
that. He might have learned all that information, in the millennia that followed between then and we actually get to the Council of Elrond. But yeah, at that time they were miles and miles away from Mount Doom at that time. They were in the vicinity, they were in Mordor, but I think he was like, you should probably destroy that ring. But also there was something about how he had obtained that ring by Sauron killing his father, and it's in that time as well, he took that ring, he took that item as what's called a waylaid or a wayleave or something like that.
Yeah, as a weirgild.
A weirgild, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, well done, good man. So it's kind of like an item that you're taking because something has been taken from you, and you're taking that from the person who took your father from you, basically. So it's almost like this. I'm taking this in representation of my father from what you've taken from me.
And no take backsies.
Yeah. Finders keepers, basically, and all that. So there was some important, and he was like, no, this is now an important thing, and that's why he was like, it'll be an heirloom of my home, whatever. Yeah. So, and then of course, it's the One Ring, like, it's not an item that most people are going to be able to just give away willy-nilly,
Yeah, and like...
not unless they're Sam Gamgee.
I suppose a lot of people do talk about, like, well, that whole scene didn't actually happen. They weren't at the cracks of doom, so... he couldn't just like push him in. But like another thing to think about is, I'll read out the quote now in a second, but like when Elrond actually counselled Isildur and said like, I think you should toss that in there, like Elrond probably wasn't confident in himself that if he took the ring he'd be able to complete the task. But also they're not alone. They're not having a private conversation. They're basically standing on the battlement of hundreds of Númenóreans and thousands of dwarves and elves, and he's like, I'm not going to start dueling with.
He was already king. Yeah, he was already king, and then the High King just died. So now he's like, right, okay, vis-a-vis, I am the new High King, not just any old regular king now. So it's like, yeah, you're not just. And Elrond wasn't, royalty at this point, or he wasn't. He was a lowly lord, I suppose.
Yeah. But at the Council of Elrond recounts what happened on the battlefield. So this is this is taken from the Fellowship of the Ring, the Council of Elrond. Alas, yes, said Elrond. Isildur took it, as should not have been. It should have been cast then into Orodrune's fire, nigh at hand where it was made. But few marked what Isildur did. He alone stood by his father in that last mortal contest, and by Gil-galad only Círdan stood, and I. But Isildur would not listen to our counsel. This I will have as weirgild for my father and my brother, he said, and therefore, whether we would or no, he took it to treasure it. But soon he was betrayed by it to his death, and so it is named in the north Isildur's Bane. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool piece taken from the Council of Elrond, where, especially the fact that this is the first nickname that the ring has gotten now. It's Isildur's Bane because of what it ended up doing to its first master after Sauron. So I thought that was pretty cool to add in there. So yeah, like you said, Isildur takes the ring as an heirloom for his house in recompense for his fallen father and his fallen brother. After defeating Sauron, Isildur returns to Gondor and takes up the mantle of King of Arnor and leader of the Dunedain. He also takes possession of, this is another item now that I didn't mention earlier before, but another item that was brought over from Númenor.
The Scepter of Numinous.
I wasn't going to say that one, but there's another item that is placed on the brow of the king.
The crown of Gondor.
So it's called the Elendilmere, which is a star-shaped white gem set upon Mithril.
But to its friends, it's called the Crown of Gondor.
Well, I was going to say, it's also referred to as the Star of the North, the Star of Elendil, the Star of the Dunedain, and the Star of the North Kingdom. and crown to Johnny from the Mellon heads. So yeah, this is basically what the kings of Arnor wore around their brows. Kind of like a tiara. I'm not going to say a crown. I think it's more like a little girly tiara. Yes.
Elrond would have loved it.
Elrond would have loved it, actually. That's very true. So basically, Isildur, what does he do with his time? He gets into horticulture, planting trees, including the seedling of the white tree in Minas Anor. This is in memory of his brother Inarion. And
one after the other. He's like, this is in memory of the last tree, which had been previously in memory of the other one, and that was in memory of the Nimloth.
Stop planting goddamn trees, Isildur. But anyways, this was significant because this tree marked the beginning of the Third Age. Well, you could say like it was the defeat of Sauron, but like this is when, he planted the tree and he was like, ha, the Third Age shall begin. And I wonder as well, how did that conversation go? Like, did everyone, like, did he just say it to the elves and they were just like, yeah, sure, Third Age, whatever. Obviously the hobbits were like, nah, feck this, we have our own way. I reckon it's different.
We've been reckoning for years. Yeah.
So
That's gas.
he also shows Anarian's son and his own nephew, Meneldil, how he would rule over the realm of Gondor. So Isildur rides with a small company, including his nephew, to Anorion. So this is like a little place in between Minas Tirith and, or I should call it Minas Anor. So this is a place in between Minas Anor and Rivendell. So just like up that passageway, going up north. So they create a tomb and memorial for Elendil on a hill that would later be called Aman Anwar. Anwar sounds kind of like an Indian name, but it actually means the Hill of Awe. While he is at Anorion, and Elendil's tomb, Isildur documents how he became to possess the One Ring, and he also transcribes the markings of the inscription of the One Ring when it's heated onto this document. He also bound the fate of his house to the ring. So when do we see this scroll come up again, Johnny?
Well, Gandalf discovers it.
Yeah.
When he's doing a bit of research, when he's back in Minas Tirith, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with Bilbo's ring, and then he stumbles upon this bit of information, and that's when he has to go back. He's also, when he goes back, he's like 99% sure that the ring is the One Ring, but he's like, okay, I just have to do one last test, and
the acid test
throws it into the fire.
Yeah, it's altogether evil. So that was about 3,000 years later. We see Gandalf finding this scroll, which is kind of cool. It makes its way back to Minas Tirith somehow. But yeah,
found his diary
in the year 2 of the Third Age on September 5th. Meneldil gains the rule of Gondor with Isildur's blessing. So this is Isildur's nephew, so Anarion's son. King Isildur, with his 3 eldest sons and a company of 200 men, travel north along the Anduin to Rivendell, where his wife and his youngest son are living. So this journey, what happens on this journey, John?
Oh, this is when there's they get attacked, they get ambushed, and the orcs kill Isildur. And
they certainly do.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie. It's after a month of journeying, the whole gang, they make camp in an area called the Gladden Fields. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this was on October 4th. At this point in time as well, Isildur believed obviously Sauron was completely defeated. He hadn't seen or heard of an orc in many months, so he left the camp completely unguarded. And the ring,
Classic.
The One Ring, which Isildur wore around his neck, it was still infused with Sauron's evil and malice, and it called out to its servants. The Dunedain are then ambushed by about 2,000 orcs from the Misty Mountains.
Wow.
So this is, remember, Isildur's traveling with 200 men, so this is 10 times the amount of forces. So basically, Isildur sent his esquire, Otar, to flee the battle with the shards of Narsil and probably the Ring of Barahir. It doesn't say that, but we can assume that because it's recovered. The orcs then brutally send wave after wave of attack, and this is where 2 of Isildur's sons are sadly slain in what will go on to be known as the disaster at the Gladden Fields. Elendil, his eldest, was the only remaining son. And I have a little piece here.
They weren't glad in them fields.
No, I have a piece to read out here. It's from the book Unfinished Tales. We get some dialogue between the father and son. So I'll just read it here now. "My king," said Elendil, "Cirion is dead and Araton is dying. Your last counsellor must advise, nay, command you, as you commanded Otar. Go, take your burden, and at all costs bring it to the keepers, even at the cost of abandoning your men and me." "King's son," said Isildur, "I knew I must do so, but I feared the pain, nor could I go without your leave. Forgive me, and my pride that has brought you to this doom." Elendil kissed him. Go now," he said. I think that's kind of sad now that Elendil, his son, gives his father a blessing to go. It's kind of rare that you see that in any books, really. It's usually like the father being like, "No, take this and you go." But like, what do you make from that? I was actually having trouble reading this passage and understanding why Isildur doesn't pass the heirloom to his son to go. Is it because he finds that the ring is just bound to him and not to his family, and he's like, it has to be me that goes with it?
I mean, it's probably, hard to reason with somebody who's, who has the One Ring, and it's obviously he has been corrupted by the ring at this time. So I don't know if he was making that decision with a clear conscience. And
but I still think that the way he does say, I knew that I must do so. Like, I knew I must have gone, but I feared the pain, nor could I go without your leave. And then he forgives him for all the trouble that he's brought. So he is kind of like, I was thinking this, but like, I needed you to be the one to say it. I feel like even his son.
Now that you brought it up.
Yeah. I feel like his son was like, well, he hasn't sent me away yet. Maybe I should just tell him to go, and he'll tell me to go and take the ring. And he's like, oh no, I just needed you to say it. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of, Isildur's still a good man.
It's a weird one.
But,
Yeah.
Like, he's a good man, but like, this is his eldest son, and he's just like, yeah, you stay in here. I'm going to run away with this ring.
Oh, it's his eldest son as well.
Yeah.
So he definitely was the one who would have been like, taking on the role of king, and he could be like, this is your moment, my boy.
Yeah, his eldest son has survived at this point. His other two sons died in battle, and his last son, the youngest, is still up in Rivendell. But anyways, Isildur puts on the One Ring with a cry of pain, it says in the book. It is said that he is never seen again by any eye in Middle-earth, but the Elendilmere, remember this is the star that shines on his head, this continues to blaze and shine. But Isildur covers the gem with his hood and he leaves the battle. So he's like this hooded guy, invisible, running around with this shining star in his head. He travels to the banks of the Anduin in the middle of the night, and he attempts to swim across. But as Galadriel says in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, it betrayed Isildur to his death. So yes, Isildur suddenly realizes that the ring is gone. He freaks out. He's overcome by a sense of loss, and he felt like while he's in the water, he just wanted to sink and drown. But then very quickly, that sense of loss kind of left. He felt that a burden had been lifted, and he planted his feet into the ground and he rose up. Unfortunately, there were orcs nearby, and they see what they believe is...
They've got a reason to live again.
Yeah, he's like, finally. But yeah, these orcs see what they believe is a monstrous shadow of fear with a piercing eye like a star. They loose their poisoned arrows, which pierce his throat and his heart as they flee. And there goes Isildur. He died instantly at the age of 234. And as it says in the same chapter in Unfinished Tales, no trace of his body was ever found by elves or men. So passed the first victim of the malice of the Masterless Ring, Isildur, second king of all the Dúnedain, lord of Arnor and Gondor, and in that age of the world the last.
So how do they know what happened to him?
Because Tolkien narrated it. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like in that same chapter, they talk about like no eye had ever seen or heard of him again, and then like immediately after, it's like so a bunch of orcs saw him and they shot him. But like,
yeah, like did the orcs tell you what they did? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, do you mean like how was this legend passed down?
Yeah, how did like later on? How did people know how he had come to his end, and how how the ring had ended up in the Anduin? And
yeah, well, that's actually a very good point. I didn't even think to look into that when preparing for this. It is interesting because
it's food for thought.
You can think about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and all those, like everything that's written is kind of known in world universe. Like there's very little that the narrator just tells us. Do you know what I mean? Like you've just mentioned there.
Yeah.
Like
well, this is one of those things maybe that, we don't know if people actually know this as a fact. We're told it, at the beginning in the prequel, or not in the
prologue.
The prologue and the prophecy.
Yeah.
And Galadriel saying that, but again, we don't really know how much of that is like this is fact, or this is what we assume happened. But he was trying to get away, but
you're right. Like the fact that this is all done incredibly detailed, like he was pierced through the heart and the neck, and he died instantly. Like that's like known fact. Whereas even earlier in this podcast, I mentioned Amandil. His grandfather, he
sailed off west. And they were like, we never saw him again, we don't know what happened.
And it's just written like the way Tolkien writes, it's just like, and he was never heard from again, and that's because nobody knew, and so Tolkien doesn't tell us, because so that is interesting. Like how do we know exactly of the way Isildur died.
Yeah. There's definitely something. There's something that we're missing.
I mean,
now. Someone espied him from afar or something, or else somebody kidnapped an orc later on and was like, what happened? And then the orc, confessed or something.
I think the orc thing, at the time they might have said like, oh, it was a monstrous shadow of fear and it had a sparkling eye, but then maybe later they were like, so we're pretty sure Isildur, the king of Gondor, died somewhere around there. Would you guys have any idea what's going on? And maybe they're like, yeah, maybe. But yeah, if anyone knows the answer to how we know this information of Isildur, please let us know. I'd be interested. It's an interesting one. So like I said earlier, the ring would go on to be nicknamed Isildur's Bane, and the line of Isildur passed down through his youngest son and only remaining son, Valandil, who was living in Rivendell. He and his descendants had become the kings of Arnor, while his cousin Meneldil, am I getting that name right? I think so. So Meneldil and his descendants would become the kings of Gondor until the end of that lineage. And it is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, hailed from the line of Valandil. He reunited the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor as the next high king of them both. So I think that's nice how, obviously the line of kings of Gondor eventually kind of dies. And Aragorn is like, well, technically I'm still related to that lineage of Arnor. So that was nice that he could kind of combine the two. And we see that in The Return of the King. Yeah, another thing I just wanted to mention here is we are told as well that the original chain that Isildur wore the ring on was discovered in the Anduin, along with the Star of Elendil or the Elendilmere. But Johnny, who found it? Do you know? So after the War of the Ring, some items were discovered in some place.
Saruman?
Yes, exactly. It was Saruman.
Yeah, because then those items were then discovered in the Tower of Orthanc after Saruman was removed.
Yeah.
And is that how we know?
Yeah, exactly. Saruman is... Obviously, we know...
And that's probably the reason why Saruman was pretty sure that the ring had fallen into the Anduin. Or else he was pretty sure that... And he convinced all the others that it had, gone down the Anduin and out into the sea. Yeah, he was searching for the One Ring in the Third Age, as we know. And he kept these items that he found, so the Elendilmere and the chain, he kept them secret in a closet in Isengard, and Aragorn and Gimli were the ones to come upon this and find it after the War of the Ring. Yes.
So yes, you can hear more about that probably in our Isengard and Tower of Orthanc episode. I'm pretty sure we talked about it a bit there.
Yeah.
And it's believed that Saruman possibly found Isildur's body and destroyed the remains. But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that because of what Tolkien says, like he was never seen of again. And I'm choosing to believe that the orcs...
to say he was never seen by mortal eyes or something.
He was never seen by... I think he was never seen by an eye in Middle-earth. Never seen again by any eye in Middle-earth. But like, the orcs saw something, but maybe it wasn't Isildur. That's why I am confused with this question that you brought up of how do we know so much detail of his doom. So there passes Isildur, son of Elendil. Yeah, that's pretty much all we know on Isildur's life. Of course, there's so many other things as well that expanded into like Númenor and Ar-Pharazôn and his battles and stuff. But like, you'd be here all week talking about the politics of Númenor.
There's a lot in it.
Yeah, so look,
I'm
focusing on Isildur just for this episode. I wanted to ask you as well, Johnny, a quick trivia question about the actor that plays Isildur in the Lord of the Rings movies. Do you know how many lines in the entire trilogy does he have?
How many lines?
Yes, does he speak?
How many words? Does he say anything apart from just no? I don't think he has any lines except for he says no. I mean, there might have been some that were shot that were then cut.
Yes, so he only has that one word no in the entire trilogy. So it was the name of the actor was Harry Sinclair, but I just want to...
Harrison Clare.
Harry Sinclair. So Harry Sinclair was actually very good friends with Peter Jackson, and PJ said that he cast him because he was, quote, the most corrupt person I know. Sorry, the most corrupt looking person I know. He looked it, but interestingly, he didn't actually sound it. So he only had one line in the entire trilogy, and that line was only 2 letters, the word no, but it didn't sound corrupt enough for Peter Jackson. So he actually dubbed out Harry Sinclair's only line in the whole thing. So can you guess who...
Only word.
The only word in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. So can you guess who dubbed in?
Is it going to be fucking Andy Serkis again, is it?
It's not Andy Serkis, but somebody else covers for Isildur and says the word no. Can you guess who it would be?
Not Don Monaghan, no?
No. It's not a member of the Fellowship.
Hugo Weaving?
Exactly. It is Hugo Weaving, yes. And it's just very ironic because Hugo Weaving doesn't just play...
So he says no to himself.
He doesn't just play one character in Lord of the Rings. He plays 2 characters.
That's amazing.
2 characters in that scene. He is the one that says no.
So that famous meme as well of like, destroy it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, he's just talking to himself.
Yeah, precisely. So
that's excellent.
I thought that was very good. So yeah,
I like that.
I think that basically wraps up our episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot about Isildur.
I did. I had a great time. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm delighted you did. So yeah, that concludes season 3 of the Council of Elrond. I just want to leave a little note here in regards to the future of the podcast. So we are going to be taking a break for a couple of months as one of us is getting married, and that apparently takes up a lot of time, but exciting times ahead. But yes, you guys can still reach us on our socials at Mellon_heads on X, Mellon Heads Official on Instagram, and remember that's 2 L's in Mellon. But I just want I want to encourage all you guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to us on YouTube and also hit the bell so that you're notified, as we certainly will be taking time to react to any major breaking news involving season 3 of The Rings of Power. Any Hunt for Gollum news as well, even the new game that's coming out in a month, we might look into that, Tales of the Shire, or anything breaking surrounding the world of Middle-earth. So yes, please do subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get this content, and you'll be notified about any random episodes that appear in the meantime before season 4 comes out. So yes, and we are also... hopefully we'll be back with a fresh look and a fresh feel to the podcast, as we'll be getting new gear for the visuals and the sounds of the podcast, so stay tuned for that. Do you guys want merch?
Exciting times.
Yeah. we'll see what's in store. But
go check out our last video as well, because I was wearing some potential merch. Some potential merch. With Mellon inscribed on t-shirts and on other items. So that's lots of things in the pipeline. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, really looking forward to season 4. Thank you guys so much for listening to this. But yes, that's all from us this season from the Mellon Heads on the Council of Elrond. Please guys, stay in touch. Please leave your reviews and your ratings, as it helps us beyond imagination. Thank you all so much from the bottom of our hearts, from the bottom of our melons, for listening. And if anybody would like to buy us a coffee or anything, you can do that as well on our Buy Me a Coffee thing, which is linked below as well. And we'll have to get the Patreon back as well for season 4. We will, yeah. But yeah. So yeah, that'll be coming. Thank you so much guys for listening. From myself, Dave. And from myself, Dave. Wait, no, I'm Johnny. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time on the Council of Elrond. See you guys.